I thought I would start off by talking about how I first met Sam Ulano, and I just lost my screen share. Just a second here. How did that happen? Getting back, where's my screen share? Stop screen share. I lost my screen share. Caryn?
Yeah.
Caryn? Are you there?
Yep,
What
I'm
happened?
here. We're seeing the screen that says Colorado Mountain Drumming, and we're seeing
Okay.
you.
Let's go get back there. How do I get rid of this screen?
Go back to turn screen sharing off and then turn it back on, and you'll see what's on your desktop, and then
Okay,
you can
cool.
choose the screen you want.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, that's a good view too. This one I like.
Okay. Colorado the drink. All right. Now I think we can move on here. I can get the slides thing. How I became a Sam Ulano student.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I started off in high school when I was. They had a. I'm from Yonkers. I grew up pretty much from 11 years old on. I came from Yonkers, New York, and in Yonkers they had a parade on Halloween, and they called it the Ragamuffin Parade. And I had some friends. I was just starting high school, and I had some friends. I think I was about 13, 14 years old, and I had some friends in the band. And I went to the band director at the parade, and I said, "Can I be in your band?" And he said, "Well, what do you play?" I said, "Well, I don't play anything, but I see you're having trouble with your cymbal player." He says, "Well, come down to the band room, and we'll try you out." So that's how I started in the marching band at my high school, Charles E. Gorton High School in Yonkers, New York. In the marching band, and if you see right in the middle there, that little guy, that was me. And my father's joke, which is the true story, is that my father said, "Well, every time the drummer kicked me, I knew when to crash the cymbals." And that's a true story. So I started taking lessons from Al over here on the very left, Albie. He was taking lessons from a guy, Carl Ferrara, in Yonkers. He said, "Well, you got to start taking lessons, but you got to learn to read music." So I started taking lessons from this guy, Carl Ferrara, and I was nowhere. It was like he was teaching me rudiments, and I didn't know what was going on. So my mother, she was riding the bus to work, and some guy said, "Well, I know about this drummer in New York, and he's very good, and you should send your son down there." So that's how I went down, and I met Sam Ulano. And actually, Sam actually took this picture of me in his studio on 48th Street on 6th Avenue, upstairs from Frank Wolf Drummer Supply. And that's a picture that Sam took with his little box camera.
Wow.
So that was me. And then Sam, I took lessons from him for a while, and then he sent me to the Catskills. And I guess you people from New York and New Jersey, you know all about the Catskills.
Yeah.
And this was the first gig that he sent me up with. The summer already started, and he sent me up to this place in Haynes Falls, New York, Cedar Hill Lodge. And that's was my first gig. I didn't know what end was up. I had Sam's drum book on the stand, and the leader, who was Bob Kay. And you guys know who Bob Kay was?
Don't know, no.
No, Bob Kay. He grew up in the Catskills in Browns. His father was the band leader. His mother was a big band singer. His uncle was Sidney Kay, who was Danny Kaye's drummer, not related to Danny Kaye, but he was his drummer. And so he came up with a musical family. By the time this kid was 17, he could outread and outplay anybody. And Bob Kay taught me all the jazz heads and taught me what to play. I had no clue what was going on. He'd say, "Play a rumba," and I'd put up Thinking Drummer book, and I'd start reading the notes. I had no idea what anything was about. So Bob, and that's a picture of Bob later, he went to Manhattan School of Music. He conducted for everybody under the sun. And if you can see over here, that's Buddy Rich. He was on the road with Buddy Rich in Europe. And I got to Denver. I'm here in Denver I think this is the 24th year, 23, 24 years. So eventually, when I retired from the Internal Revenue Service, I was always playing drums. So, and of course, it's all Sam Ulano's fault. uh, I had a plan to play drums. And I met a lot of people. And these are all the bands that I play in now. Of course, I'll talk. I'm going to talk a little bit about my teaching, but with the Shriners, I take some of my students. They have a wagon, a float. So we do a couple of parades a year. Of course, the St. Patrick's Day parade was canceled. Most likely, the Memorial Day parade will be canceled. And I take a couple of students to ride on the float. These musicians that we play in that band are so old that if they had a march, they'd have to have an emergency vehicle behind them to pick up the people because they'd never be able to march in a parade. But we ride on this stupid looking float, and I take a couple of my students with me to help me play, and that's kind of fun. Marv also has a band, a Civil War band, and I play in that occasionally. We do some gigs. Of course, that all is pretty much canceled. And that's me with the Civil War drum. So now, how did I get into teaching? That's the next section. Okay, well, what happened was I was riding on the bus. Well, no, actually, going back when my son was in elementary school, he, of course, is a drummer, and they had a bunch of drummers. And what usually happens is that the band teachers, they have one class in percussion and are expected to teach it in school. And these kids that were in the elementary school weren't getting anywhere. So I started a drum class. So that was more or less the beginning of my drum teaching. And then what happened was I was riding on the bus, and one of the Filipino guys had said, my son wants to learn drums. Can you teach him? So I started teaching him. The next thing I knew, I had about 5 or 6 Filipino drum students. And that kept me going for a while, and that was the start. And I created a studio down here, and it works out very well. And as you probably know, when you're a drum teacher, anything you buy that has drums in it, you can take as a tax deduction. So that works really nice, and I buy all my toys and stuff. So I started learning how to teach and come down with a method. I started out using Sam Ulano's ABC guide, which is totally out of print. I don't. Caryn said she managed to find a couple of copies of it, but this really is a Bible book. It has everything in it that you could possibly want to teach a drum student. It's a Bible. I go over in the first lesson. I go over everything with the students, the staff, the notes, how to count. It's all in there, as you can see on these pages that I'm putting up now, exactly how to count and everything between dynamics, ties, triplets, how to count everything, dynamics, tempo markings. You're leaving?
Yeah, I have things to do.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm
Okay.
a Brooklyn College alumna also.
Oh.
Thank you. It's nice to
Right.
meet you.
Nice to
Okay.
meet you. Right.
Okay. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Take care, Michelle.
So you can see everything is in this book. It's like a Bible. It's a good reference book. It has tempo markings. It has dynamics. Talk about dynamics, louder and softer. I repeat myself over and over again to my kids so that it drills into their head, and I show them point out all these things constantly to them. This is the first page. In the first lesson, I go through all the stuff I just talked about. And of course, how to count, and very simple, get them started reading. By the time they finish this book, they can read every type of note. And I also supplemented with my own pages. I took Sam's method and I augmented Sam's method, and I give them a lot of my own stuff that I put together in a loose leaf that I bind together. This is a chop builder, which gets the hands working. One of the seminars that we had, we talked about metal sticks. I still get the metal sticks. The only place you can get the metal sticks now is $25 a pair or $20 a pair, depending when you go online. And I found them in a company in China was making them. and it was on what's that? Slips my mind. The name of the not Amazon, but the other one that you can get on to buy
Is it
stuff.
eBay?
I'm sorry?
Is it eBay?
eBay. You can find them on eBay. If you look around for metal sticks, you can find the metal sticks. And they're the same metal sticks that I was getting from Sam. As you know, that drummer that passed away in Connecticut recently, he was selling them. As you know, rolls are very hard to teach. It's something that it's in the fingers and the hands and the wrist motion. And here's the roll study guide, which we go through, which of course only has rolls, roughs, and flams. Of course, we don't teach rudiments because Sam didn't believe in rudiments. What I'm finding out here is very interesting is that when the kids get into marching band, and they asked them to learn rudiments, and the three high schools that I service, none of the marching drum teachers asked them if they could play rudiments. They just showed them what the sticking was, and they started playing it. And evidently, I got a feeling rudiments, well, I always get this argument with different people, rudiments are going out. And I always read them that paragraph, you know, that famous paragraph of Sam's that was published in a magazine about rudiments, how Sam felt about rudiments. Of course, Sam wasn't really into marching, drumming very much. But if you're going to go into Blue Nights like they have here, which is the world famous drum and bugle corps, you probably have to know rudiments. But evidently in the high schools here, depending on who the drum instructor is that they hire, and most of them are young kids that just graduated from the music program up at Greeley, and they're looking for some work. They don't last too long because it's not full-time employment, but some of them, you know, want some rudiments and some of them don't. And from what I found, the three high schools that I service, they do not. So, and after I used, there's Sam's Thinking Drummer book. That book, he updated it. I think it's still out of print. I don't think you can get it anywhere. Has every dance rhythm that you can possibly name. Now, what I do is I teach, I make my own sheets of all the different dance rhythms, just the basic rhythms, and I teach them all the basic rhythms and then let them take off from there. Once they get the feel and the basic rhythms, they can take off on their own. So Sam's book has all kinds of variations in it. Right. I also teach them a lot of history. One of the seminars I went on, they talked about a lot of these books, and I've read a lot of these books. I haven't quite gotten through these Bert Correll books. They're sort of out of print, and you can get them online in used bookstores. This one also, Buddy Rich, Traps. That book is an old book also. But all these books here are wonderful books. History of rock and roll. As I go through things and I talk to the kids, I talk to them about old drummers and new drummers. My favorite drummer right now is Kenny. Before Kenny, it was Louis Belson. Reason because they're percussionists. They were all around drummers. They could do anything. And of course, Kenny is a total fanatic, crazy man. He lives, breathes, and this is a very good book about his history. And of course, Buddy's book is very good, the new Buddy book. And also Bobby Morris's book, if you're interested in Las Vegas. I actually met Bobby Morris when I first got to Las Vegas. My manager was in an office with Bobby Morris, and I met him and I did some errands for him. He was at that time a manager, managing bands, and I actually met him way back when. And then I want to talk a little bit about this book. If you know about John Kovish, and let's see if I get the next slide. He has some online history of rock and roll free seminars. They're free. They're from the university where he teaches in upstate New York. Slips my mind right now. Rochester, I think, University of Rochester. I think it's, he teaches there. He's a professor there. And he teaches history of rock and roll. He's an unbelievable guitar player and very approachable, nice guy. And if you want to take his courses, they're free, they're online. This is the URL, www.course.org, Learning History of Rock and Roll. And this is his book, I think he's written 2 books. He has 1 class on the Beatles, history of the Beatles, and this one. You take one class a week, and it's free, completely free, and a really wonderful lecture series. Okay, so now we're getting into the last part of the presentation today, is the ABC Guide. Now, the ABC Guide has a lot of great pages in it. I picked out some pages that were interesting, and pages that some of the students have problems with. Of course, ties. Ties are very interesting because, you know, a lot of the drum books, including the Louis Bellson book, has a lot of ties in it.
Yeah.
I don't understand the reasoning behind that, because I have a collection now of 5 or 6 years of percussion music that I've been playing with concert bands. I hardly ever see any ties in any of that music. Once in a while in a Latin rhythm, you see a tie, but none of the concert music has any ties in it. But they're in the books, so you got to learn to play it. So I put these pages in. We can go through a couple of pages. Caryn asked me about that triplet with the line on top, and that's kind of interesting too, because sometimes I see that written that way, a triplet, and sometimes I don't. I don't know if Sam did it on purpose or it was a typo, but maybe just because sometimes you see a triplet written that way. And sometimes Sam he puts things in there to see if you're paying attention or ask a question. I notice he does that once in a while in his books.
What I really think, because if you look at the triplet, 1, 2, 3, 4 lines from the bottom, or even 2 lines from the bottom.
Yeah.
And you look at the triplet, the one that you're talking about, 2 lines from the bottom.
Yeah.
It looks like it's more bold, and it looks like it's maybe a different font, and maybe just that curved line just automatically shows up in that font.
Yeah, that could be too.
Yeah,
But
it's not connected to the note. Like all the ties are connected to the actual note head. So I think there might have just been a different font there.
no, say something. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. So this is my copy. It looks different from yours. It's like a yellow and white book.
Right, that was the original book. I think actually that the original one had a darker yellow, I think. Yeah. How did you get that book?
Dominic Giartano.
Oh.
Yeah. So I have a question. I'm not seeing in your pages this, and maybe you have it in other ones, but let me try to find a page. I don't know if Sam did this or if Dominic did, but this was one of the pages that you pulled out, exercise 11. Somebody went over the counts, like intentionally crossed them out. And so I was wondering if Sam ever did that with you, maybe to, because if I have a student, just learning notes on piano, let's say, sometimes they'll write in, that's a C, that's a F, whatever. And so I'm thinking that maybe so that your eyes don't go right to underneath and that you're actually looking at the rhythms, because you're not going to see the counts written out in a concert band or an orchestra sort of situation.
Right.
Did Sam ever do that with you? Would he like cross out the counting underneath?
No, he never crossed it out. In fact, that page, I don't know, your book, my page has a type.
If you count out loud, I don't think it'll cut out.
Okay. Well, it's just 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So, all right, 12, 8, nice and slow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 1, 2, da, 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 da. Rest, da, da. Rest, rest, rest. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.